All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to Education of Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you tonight. Got Dustin Dodery with me. Brad Vandalette is away again, so it'll be the two of us with you tonight. Okay, let's jump into this one. Again, it's kind of a funny little title, but it is definitely going to be a really cool conversation. So I titled tonight's episode, Not All Villains Are Equal. And I particularly enjoyed the graphic for this one just because it had on the graphic, for those that haven't seen it as we're listed, I'll describe it. But first off, let's go through a list of names. Johnny Lawrence, all right. We all know Johnny Lawrence from the Karate Kid, Cobra Kai. We got Johnny Lawrence. We have Mike Myers from the Halloween movies. We have Jason Voorhees from the classic, the greatest, Friday the 13th. And then we had a good old-fashioned Freddy Krueger in there. So I kind of had on one side the Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger, and across I had Johnny Lawrence, and I had the little verse sign in between those guys. And so I'd actually start the podcast by asking this question: what do Johnny Lawrence, Cobra Kai, what does Johnny Lawrence, Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger all have in common? Right? So that'd be question number one. What do these guys all have in common? And then the second question is, what separates these guys? Okay, so just think about that real quick. What do they have in common? That's the first question. And the second is, what separates these guys? Figure that out. We'll be back in a few seconds. We're going to dive deep because not all villains are created equal. Every day I hear more stories of good people being brutally assaulted and murdered by some individual who has a repeat history of violent offenses, drug addiction, and mental health issues, who is free to walk the streets in the same city where I live, work, and where I am raising my two daughters. Well, I'm tired of screaming at the TV, and enough is enough. Throughout history, there have always been men willing to answer the call to the threats against our way of life. Well, today, that threat is right outside our doors, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, on our public transportation system, outside the places we work, and even outside of our children's schools. My new mission is to create and train a group of men that believe in the right to life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life, his family, and his property. I'm Greg LaBeouf. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, okay. So not all villains are created equal. I asked two questions before we cut to the intro. So question number one is Johnny Lawrence, a.k.a. the Karate Kid, Johnny. And then we have Mike Myers from the Halloween movies, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, and classic Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. So the first question was, what do all four of these individuals have in common? Dustin, what do they have in common? Any ideas?
They're all, technically speaking, they're all bad guys.
Yeah,
They're
they're
all
all villains.
adversaries in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 100%. They're all villains, right? Okay, but of course, this makes answering the second question very easy. How are they different?
Well, three of them are murderers, and one of them is a martial artist, or I guess you could say a fighter.
Yeah. Okay. So, Johnny Lawrence from the Karate Kids. Let's go back to the originals. He's a bad dude, right? But is he really, right? He's this teenage angst. He's got this mentor, and he's strike first, strike hard mindset and all this shit. And then along comes little Ralph Macchio's character, who was in his 30s, I believe, when he played that character. But the point is, steals his girlfriend, kind of, starts flirting his girlfriend. Anyways, everyone gets the whole story, right? So he's the bad guy in that movie. And there's a lot of movies and a lot of situations where that is the definitive bad guy, right? He's just a mean dude. But then you go to these, albeit, horror movie genre type, fictional characters of Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy the Krueger. And of course, like you said, these guys are fucking murderers, right? Now, this is classic, horror shit. I mean, how many times has each of these guys been killed and come back to life? Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees is always my favorite. The fucking dude never runs. You know what I mean? I don't think any of these guys really ever run, although Freddy Krueger, I think, has a Braxton-esque kind of run down a hallway that we've seen. Yes, he has a kind of a stealth mode run. But they don't fucking run. And they're just savage. They're carnage. I mean, every show is just an interesting way to kill people. And there's no remorse. There's no. I mean, again, it's unhuman-like in a way, right? So, but why it shows this is because there's actually parallels to this when it comes to understanding violence or talking about self-defense or personal protection. And I actually want to kind of cover this in three different areas. And one is the legal area, the second is the practical area, and the third is the psychological area. And I'm going to do them in that order, but that this is not, they're not arranged in any type of priority. It's just there's interesting points that I want to put down range on this. So let's just jump into this. There is actually something, my first overall point is there's something that's called a standard, right? And the standard is, what are you training to? So like we always say the context determines the content. You have to create the standard by which you're training, because the context of what you're training for, right? When you understand the context, that determines the content. So that shapes what you're going to train, how you're going to train it. Okay, so we say this lots, and anyone that follows the podcast is probably getting tired of hearing that, but it's just such a fundamental truth. So if we're looking at it, are you training for Johnny Lawrence or are you training for, Jason Voorhees? Right? And make it practical. Are you training for, three drunk guys, three drunk frat boys that are out, rude, inappropriate, aggressive, and violent? And listen, I'm not saying those guys can't pose in an imminent risk to your life. It can. But for the most part, like our representative, Johnny, is not out trying to murder somebody. Okay? And, might want to beat the fuck out of you, might want to give you a beat down, talk shit, all that type of stuff. Doesn't mean it can't end, with death, but that's not the intent. Whereas you look at our classic horror villains, and I mean, they're not looking to give someone a beat down. They're straight up murdering people. They're psychotic. Okay? And we have our saying, right? You can fight a fighter, but you can't fight a killer. You got to kill a killer. And a lot of people, again, will just dismiss that as just a bravado-esque type statement. But no, not really. Not all villains are created equal. It's like, if we just try to sit for a second and talk about the standard, not only do I know people who are friends of mine who have been murdered, but I get clients all the time who have suffered loss, meaning family members have been murdered. They themselves have been the victim of an attempted murder. And so this part of it is very real. And when your life is impacted this way, and you have people, whether it's you directly or even second or third hand, but when people come into your world that are impacted this way, you find out about the types of individuals that committed these heinous crimes. And although at times they are the Johnny type villain where shit just went really fucking bad, and maybe there was no intent there, no intent to murder, but at the end of the day, someone ends up dead. And so the result is the same. It doesn't tend to make the family feel any better when the attacker says, geez, I didn't mean to. I thought just slamming his head down on the concrete and starting to punch him 100 times, I didn't think he'd die. I mean, I wasn't trying to kill him. That doesn't fill that hole. And then you have individuals, violent predatory criminals, who, for the second, third, and in some cases many more times, violently assault or murder people and then are re-released, put back onto our streets and do it again. And you just have, when you start looking at who these people are, their history, history of behavior, the mental states they're in, the drug, it doesn't matter. You just start recognizing these are horrible, horrible, vile people who, with intent many times, with lack of empathy and any type of remorse or compassion, will just inflict their will upon the vulnerable. And sometimes not even the vulnerable, but at any opportune moment. So you can't help but start to go, listen, we're dealing with some seriously sociopathic people. So there's different degrees of evil. Now, in the context of defending yourself, whether it's a Johnny-esque type villain who may not have the intent to kill you, well, you still want to be able to protect against that because, as we talked about, shit happens. But there is also a much more severe case where you have a thinking, living, breathing, independent, willful human being who, with 100% intent and purpose, is invested in wiping you off the face of this earth. Which of these is the more difficult predator to defend against? I mean, in my opinion, and you can give me yours, it is no competition. You know what I mean? As our analogy, I want to train for the Freddy Kruegers, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers of the world, the people that have the intent. So, I mean, just we're gonna get into the three areas here, but I'm assuming, and correct me or put your don't let me put words in your mouth, but that you feel very much the same.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the same thing we always talk about, the difference between antisocial aggression and asocial violence. Two very, very different scenarios, which is exactly what you've just spent the last few minutes describing. So yeah, they are polar opposite. And another thing we always talk about is like just the ability to throttle down. So of course you want to train for worst case scenario because you can always dial that back. That's much more easy to control, manage, throttling something down versus trying to throttle up in a time of urgency, right? So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and just to echo it, because you said like that is the learning, that is the takeaway point, right? Meaning, do you know the difference between antisocial aggression, which just means this: you have choice. There is choice to remove, de-escalate, or deter. So many times when you're facing the Johnny Lawrences, those types of villains, there is often ample opportunities to remove, de-escalate, or deter. And a lot of people would potentially disagree. No, what about they fucking attack you and this? But you got to look at the context as a whole. There is almost always opportunities to remove, de-escalate, or deter. And people don't really fully unpack that to understand how that works. Let me just give people a quick example because maybe this will help some people understand it. I go to a restaurant that I love to go to with my wife and my kids. And so we eat at this restaurant often, once every couple weeks. And so one night we go into this restaurant, and while we are parking, there is an individual who comes in, parks next to me, but parks like 4 inches from my door. I can't even get out my side of the vehicle. And he gets out and proceeds to walk in, him and his couple buddies, who they all funnel out his door laughing, thinking it's hilarious. I have to crawl over, I get out, I give the guy the look, man, man, what's going on? Like, why park so close? Like, you got tons of room, like I can't even get out of my car. And they laugh and give me the finger, and it becomes this thing. So we go in, we have our meal, we're eating our meal, and the entire time, this table of guys keeps looking over, laughing. And so, I'm eating, minding my own business, but I it's almost impossible not to be aware that they're staring. And so there's this eye contact that happens, and there's this kind of what we call a disengaged conflict. There's conflict there, but it's not verbal, it's not physical, it's through body language, it's through, behavioral kind of patterns and stuff, right? Remember, this is all hypothetical that I'm going through right now. So all of a sudden, what happens is 2 weeks later, I go back and these same guys are there. And so this kind of builds a little bit. And then 2 weeks later, I go back and these guys are there. And now on the third visit, all of a sudden, as I'm sitting there eating with my family, the next thing I know is there's two guys standing over my left shoulder. And all of a sudden, one guy's got his hand on the back of my neck, pushes my head down on the table. And the other guy hauls off and punches me in the face. Right? Now, maybe that's where it ends. He hauls off, punches me in the face in front of my family, my daughters, all this type of stuff. So I get up and I start saying, I was attacked, it was unprovoked. And people would then, I share this story, oh man, that's bullshit, they sucker punched you. There was no opportunity for you to remove, de-escalate, or deter that situation. Now, if I jumped up from the table and grabbed the bottle off the table and smashed the first guy in the face, and as the other guy's standing there, and I snap him in the fucking eyes, grab the back of his head, shove my thumb in his eye socket, or I just give him a couple hard, stiff fucking elbows, and both guys are lying on the floor, one with severe lacerations from the bottle, the other because I elbow smashed and fractured orbital bones, and, I may not have meant to, but his eyeball falls back into his skull because his orbital bones have been fractured. These guys are now suffering serious injuries, and I say, well, listen, I was assaulted, man. Police come, criminal investigation, we're going to go to court. How do people think this is going to play out for me? Right? Because people are going to say, oh man, that's bullshit. You can't do nothing anymore. These guys were fucking with him and you can't touch criminals, otherwise you're going to get charged. And it's like, let's pump the brakes for half a second here. Matter of fact, this will just lead me to my first point. When we talk about how villains aren't all created equal, when it comes to the legal side of this, I always hear people say, man, listen, if the criminal gets roughed up, it's you that's going to get charged. So the story I just went through is all of a sudden I get charged with assault. Now, being charged and being convicted are two different things. We have to have our day in court. Maybe it goes to trial and I get a jury of my peers and they go through all the evidence. And at the end of the day, sitting here, having told you that story, hypothetical story, I'm probably going to get convicted. Now, maybe I don't, but there's a very high likelihood I get convicted. And why is that? So your opinion, Dustin, as I told the story, as an educated, as a weaponized man, how does my defense of my proclamation that I defended myself, how does that stand up in your eyes?
Yeah, you're gonna have a problem because as you were talking about it, you're like week 1 this, week 2 this, week 3, or it was 2 weeks apart, whatever.
Yeah.
By trip number 3, you now have like all this history and backstory with these guys. Is like, to me, in my mind, we always talk about scene 1, scene 2, scene 3.
Yeah.
The event horizon of any event. You can kind of start to foreshadow what you think is going to happen based on having an educated eye and studying violence. And so, yeah, we talk about scene 1, 2, 3. Well, when you started talking about the third trip back, and I'm like, Jesus, we're on scene like 27. like that's how many, and that's probably an understatement, but it's like, that's how many opportunities there was to prevent where that went to. And this is just one reason why you would be in trouble, I think, legally, because there's a whole bunch of other, get into the pin index and threat queues and all of that stuff, which would play a massive role too. But just on this one point, it's like there was so many opportunities for you not to be in that situation and not to end up doing what you did. So yeah, that's going to be harder to defend for sure.
100%, right? Because what I think people fail to understand is that when a conflict happens, even a disengaged conflict like that, and then I go back to that, say, yeah, but I have, and I do, this is true, I have the freedom to go back to the restaurant that I've been eating at, let's say, for 3 years. I've never seen these guys there before, and all of a sudden these guys start showing up. Well, it's a public place, so they have the right to be there, just like I have the right to be there, but here's the thing. We had a conflict. That conflict is now ongoing. Every time I return and they return, there is tension. I can feel it, they can feel it. It is building. Whether I like that or not, it's building. So what happens to me is, though, legally, even imagine asking a lawyer asking you a very simple question. Did you expect to see them there that night? And it's like, well, for the last 3 times that I was there, yes, I saw them. So the answer is, like, you can't say, no, I didn't expect to see them there.
Yeah. So
you say, I did expect to see them. So now even there, when they say, listen, do you carry a knife on you? Say, yes, I always have a knife on me. Why? Well, because it's a tool. Like, that's all a knife is just a tool. Matter of fact, it's one of man's earliest tools. But they're going to start looking at it and saying, well, do you always carry a knife? And for me, I always carry a knife. Everywhere, every time, every day. There is not a place I go where I don't have my knife with me, right? Because the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So I have a precedent that I always carry this tool with me. And I've used this tool for many, many different, the nature of the intended use of the tool is the manner in which I use it, right? I've used it to cut rope and cut seatbelts and open up hot dogs and, whittle wood. I mean, I've used it for all kinds of different things. So the point is, for most people, though, if they don't have that consistent pattern of behavior, and that one day they go, well, we're going to go to the restaurant, back of their mind somewhere is, goes, geez, what if those 3 clowns are there? And all of a sudden they pick up a tack pen, they put a knife into their pocket, they do whatever, they just, whatever the fuck it happens to be. The point is, they're going to look at this and say, listen, you knew they might be there, so therefore they're going to start trying to, prove, and they might have a lot more, ease in doing this, that what you were doing was with some form of intent, which is not self-defense, right? Because right now in Canada, like, you can't pick up something with the intent and say, I carry this solely for the purpose of self-defense, right? It's just the way that it is, because you're revealing a form of intent to use it in such manner. But it's like, we can carry all kinds of tools, pens and tack lights and knives and all kinds of different things, because these are tools, and the manner with which they're meant to be used is the manner in which I use them as tools, and I use tools in whatever course of the day as the tool is required, I use it. You need a screwdriver, you get a screwdriver. So anyways, the bigger thing with this is that what happens is there was an opportunity to remove, de-escalate, or deter, to diffuse that. Where I would have simply been like, you know what, we're not going to go this week. We're going to give it a couple months and let this diffuse a little bit. Or we're going to, just go to a different restaurant or whatever it is. And a lot of people would have an argument that it's like, you shouldn't have to do that. And I'm like, but listen, there's a couple things. No, you're right. I shouldn't have to do this. But the reality is that I am doing this because I choose safety. Hashtag choose safety. I choose to be a protector for my family. And this is over nothing. This is not a hill that I'm going to die on. This is not a matter of, these are ego things. And I have a million other places that I enjoy eating, and I'd rather do that and enjoy my food not around those types of people. So I remove myself from that situation. Now, this is very different if, as we go back to the first incident and I sit in the restaurant and we're eating, then I realize, hey, listen, we just ordered our food. This is getting, these guys, this is just building. And say, you know what, change your order, get it to go, here's the money. They collect our food, we make our way out, get back in the car, start the car and start driving away. And now as I'm driving away, all of a sudden 3-4 blocks away from the restaurant, I notice this truck following me. And so, I take a different few turns and, see if they're following me, whatever it happens to be. I even try to drive by a local police station and see where they're at, but it seems like they're gone. Okay, maybe we lost them, they stopped, okay. So we make our way home. And then all of a sudden, later that evening at 11 o'clock, the kids are in bed and you're sitting up, and all of a sudden, a brick flies through your window, or the front door gets kicked open. And now all of a sudden, here these 3 guys rush into your home. And then the scenario can go from there, because now we'd have to talk about pin indexes and proximity to the children's rooms and all the, environment. All these different things are going to play a factor in this. But the one thing that we can look at is we've gone now from antisocial aggression, and it has converted into asocial violence, where I am devoid of choice. There was no choice. There was no opportunity for me now to remove de-escalated deter. Right? So now I'm in a very, very different situation. And if now the situation, in fact, goes physical, then we are dealing with a very, very different set of circumstances, where self-defense truly becomes what we are, capable of doing. Like, legally, we are allowed to defend ourselves when we are facing imminent grievous bodily harm and death and devoid of choice, asocial violence. But most men would not understand the context. So even if you look at this, the 3 guys that are in the restaurant where shit builds, and 3 or 4 visits later, they're slamming my head into the table, they're Johnny Lawrences. It took 3 they're Johnny Lawrences. They're Karate Kid bad guys. Now, again, they slam my head off the table. The guy hits me. Who knows? They hit me a couple times. Whatever. They could kill me. It could happen. But it wasn't their intent. Which, again, when you're dead, you're dead. But I'm just saying that's a different type of villain. And if I do all of a sudden have to stand up and defend myself, I have to recognize that I am defending myself from antisocial aggression. And so the level of force spectrum is different. In our cases, this is throttling way back. This is not what we're training for. What the training that we do allows you to do is be smart enough to remove yourself from that situation and not get to the 3rd fucking visit. You would have intercepted it in the 1st fucking visit. It just would have stopped, been like, watch this. I'm going to box this threat. Special forces do it all the time. Yet average men can't do it because they're untrained and unrestrained, and they're driven by ego and emotion. And that's just the simple truth of it. Yeah, so, I think whereas trained and restrained professionals aren't. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I jotted 3 things down earlier, and you've already said 2 of them just in talking, but just the idea of the average man, untrained, unrestrained, their inability to not show up for scene 3 or scene 23 or whatever it is, but just that ability to be like, well, no, I couldn't walk away, or I have the right, what it is to me is 3 things. One is rights, and you hit on that. You're like, well, I have the right to be there. I have every right to be there just as much as they do. 100% you do. But then just understand that legally changes your ability to defend yourself in a legal way, right? Yeah. I think the other one, which you already said too, was ego. Ego, I think for men, it's massive. Everybody has to kind of do a self-check and look at that, because ego, I think, sucks a lot of people into these antisocial aggression type situations that can turn really bad. So I think that's a big one. And then the last one, I think, is social contract. That was one that, you haven't touched on yet tonight, but again, to give an example, and it will still stick to the whole restaurant thing, but maybe visit number 2 or visit number 3, or even it's visit number 1 and something starts to kind of brew, but you're there for your friend's birthday, or, your whatever it is, the work Christmas party, I don't care. But the point is, something's happening, something's brewing, and you're like, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is going to go bad, but I got to be here. It's so-and-so's birthday. I can't just leave. It's like, no, yeah, you can. you 100% can leave.
Yeah.
But it's easy to be like, well, no, I can't, because it's this, it's that, it's my kid's birthday party. They have all their friends here. Like, do you know what I mean? But so I think that social contract, that pressure can make you get sucked into something that really is antisocial aggression. But then, like you said, that can still end really, really bad for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, again, it's not that I don't understand that, and it's not that we're not susceptible to it, but the training allows us to circumvent it much easier in the sense of, again, like and especially when you live your life as a sovereign man, like meaning that we enjoy our freedoms and we believe in our freedoms. So you know, you can easily look at a situation. Well, I'm not leaving because this is my right to be here. But again, hashtag choose safety. The safety of my family, my personal safety and the safety of my family is paramount over a lot of other things. So I'm going to make decisions to hashtag choose safety. I'm going to do the smart, I'm going to do the strategic and tactical thing. Why? Because I'm weaponized, I'm trained and restrained. Like that is, now we're emotional creatures. We all have chinks in the armor, but that is not my mission. That is not my mandate. That is not why I train. I train to be able to recognize these situations, regulate my emotions, and do the smart thing, which is to box the threat, remove yourself from the situation, remove the escalated deterrent. Because when that is always choice number one, and when your training trains that into you, conditions you to always go, look, did you see this? Your brain's already thinking ahead to going tactical, but you're missing the fact that there's a back door here. Like right here, you can remove the escalated deterrent. Take that opportunity. Because when you understand violence, violence is about one thing, and that's destruction. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. So you learn to place a tremendously high value on removing, de-escalating, and deterring. And oftentimes, it's many people have a feeling and think of it as subjugating themselves to the will of others. I'll leave. But you got to remember, I can only control me. I control my actions, my words, my motivations, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it strategically and tactically. I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to allow them to manipulate me. You know, me being like, fuck you, I'm not leaving, you leave. I'm not leaving, you leave. That's them manipulating you into this. So the social contract side of it and getting sucked into it is a very, very, very powerful point that I'm glad you brought up. So I want to wrap this part up with the legal part. Remember, not all villains are created equal. And so here's one of the things. You know, this is a statement that got posted in response to something I did not long ago. But it just said, listen, if the criminal gets roughed up, or I think the word was, banged up. If the criminal gets banged up, who gets charged? And the response by multiple people was, oh, make no mistake about it, you get charged. And that was one of the things that spurred the thought process of, listen, even in that statement, if the criminal gets banged up, who gets charged? And then people going, you get charged. Make no mistake, you under this government, you get charged. Well, if you banged up the criminal, I already know that your perception of what a criminal is, that you just banged up, is a Johnny Lawrence. You're literally picturing a Karate Kid villain. And here's kind of takeaway. Why is this, right? Men tend to envision somebody they can beat up. That's their attacker. That's their bad guy. They might picture him 6'8" and, Stone Cold Austin type looking motherfucker, but they just picture him, crack, 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 and down he fucking goes. And these are men that have no training. You know what I mean? These are just men that think, I lift some weights, or a lot of them, I used to play high school football, they're fucking Al Bundys. 4 touchdowns, 1 game. Check tape. You want to check tape? Like, it's fucking true. Like, and they just ride that wave of like, I'm a man. Fuck you. I know how to fight, because that's what men have to say. What in this country, where the rite of passage from boyhood to manhood is when you fuck your first woman and you have your first fight. If you haven't fucked a chick and you haven't had a fight, you're not a man. And so men will lie about both. You know what I mean? You got 18, 19-year-old kids talking about the 35 women they've slept with and the 10 fights they've been in, and yet they've got 0 on either count. And whatever. I'm just saying, those are 2 subjects men are always going to lie about. And other men accept the lies because they're lying too. And if they're not straight up lying, there's an exaggeration. There's a lie in there somewhere. I mean, that's it. Because that is what, this society hangs our manhood on. You know what I mean? At least that's the generations that I grew up in. That's what it was for sure. Right? So, Yeah, I think most men, because like just the arrogance and being like, yeah, the criminal, I banged up this guy, and then I get fucking charged. It's really weird, but I've never pictured, Johnny Lawrence kicking my front door in. I've never pictured that. But maybe it's because I was the victim of an attempted murder, so I picture fucking Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy fucking Krueger. Maybe because I study criminality and I see the type of fucking evil sons of bitches that have no fucking empathy, sociopaths, just been conditioned by their life factors. I mean, these motherfuckers, mental illness, drug addiction, they don't value life at all. And so that's when I train. I mean, again, like we said, you don't rise to your expectations, you fall to your level of training. So what level of training are you falling to? Meaning, what's the standard you're training against? If all you're training for is Johnny Lawrence and Mike Myers shows up, you're fucked, right? You can fight a fighter, but you can't fight a killer. They don't fight fair. It's all about destruction. They don't give a fuck. They're going to wipe you off the face of the fucking earth. And there's going to be zero resistance. You're going to put up zero resistance because you're living in a fucking antisocial aggression world. You're living in Karate Kid land, right? You literally fear Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is not that badass a gang. You know what I mean? Despite what the TV series might imply, they're just not that dangerous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. It is by far. It's way too unilateral because those comments are like, there's a bad guy, and every single bad guy, every single situation, all boils down to one character, let's say, or whatever word you want to use, and it's like, man, it's not that simple. Like, not even close to that simple. And like you have to be able to see the difference, number one, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's like you got to, again, back to like the PIN index, understanding threat cues, like interpersonal communication, body language, behavior. Like if you can't look at those three things and look at that and analyze the bad guy to figure out what side is this guy on, is this antisocial aggression or asocial violence? Well, then yeah, then you potentially will be charged and you will be the one who goes to jail under any government because you don't even understand what you're doing, right?
Well, you don't understand the definition of self-defense.
No.
Most people, they don't, like if I just took a piece of paper and drew a line down it and said one side is self-defense and the other side is punishment. Write me out detailed descriptions of what accounts for what. Most men, they can't do that. They have no clue what the difference between punishing is. And they're emotional creatures that get driven. Remember, there's a very powerful thing. We should do a podcast on this just alone. It's called forebrain rationalization. You know how easy it is for our brains to rationalize bad behavior? You're at the mall, someone steals you, like you were waiting for 45 minutes, someone, finally a car backs out and some dude just comes ripping in there and steals your spot you've been waiting for 45 fucking minutes. That's your fucking spot. Your forebrain goes like, yeah, you should get out, grab this guy by the hair, pull his head half out his door and start slamming his door on his head. Because like you think you can just fucking do that? Who the fuck are you? Do you know what I mean? Like your forebrain is like, yeah, man, that guy deserves that shit. Our moral compass goes, fuck you, I'm right, you're wrong, fuck you. I'll take this pipe and, bash your fucking window in. Oh, you want to stand up to me? Now that pipe's hitting him in the head. All that happens because you get emotional and your forebrain rationalizes that you're right. That's forebrain rationalization. Luckily, the midbrain has a much stronger resistance to killing. Otherwise, you'd have a lot more people there'd be a lot more unintentional murders happening. But people don't even understand forebrain rationalization. And that's where you get into punishing. That has nothing to do with self-defense. So the second I hear somebody saying, well, what happens if the criminal gets banged up? A, how the fuck did you bang up this criminal? If you just banged him up, then he wasn't much of a threat, was he? So if he wasn't a threat, you weren't talking asocial violence, so you're talking fucking antisocial aggression, which means that you can defend yourself, but the levels of force that you can use are far less. Right? You know what I mean? And what it really sounds like is you just went forebrain rationalized and fucking punished him. Yeah, you're fucking... And then you still don't know what to say. You missed the most important day of the week, which is the shut the fuck up Friday. And you start making statements to police and media and shit like that. Because I didn't miss that day of training. I was busy, I had to go curling at beer league. Hockey, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh yeah, well you shouldn't have, shut the fuck up Friday is a pretty important day. Right? Talk to your lawyer and only your lawyer. So, I mean, yeah, you get charged. Fucking big mystery. But it is, to the uneducated and the untrained and the unrestrained, it absolutely is. And then I'm just going to say it real quick, but then that fucks it for the rest of us that understand the legal rights. You just paint a horrible fucking picture, just broad brushstrokes, and everybody goes, you can't defend yourself. Well, the problem is we've got a lot of uneducated, incapable, unskilled, unknowledgeable fucking idiots who have no need to defend themselves in those moments, but try to punish everybody because they get forebrain rationalized, they get their fucking egos involved, and they want to look like a big man in front of whoever, or just to themselves, right? And then it fucks up everything for everybody else. And everybody thinks it's the same fucking thing, which it's not. So anyways, my last statement on the legal side of it, right? I believe that most men, they always envision somebody they can easily beat up. They often think of the Johnny Lawrence type situations. Why? Is because most men don't ever want to admit that they've bitten off more than they can chew. So when they have to think about defending themselves and they have no training, no skill sets, no knowledge, they have nothing, right? Other than, what they think they did in the past, or because they bench press 500 pounds or some silly thing like that. They got, whatever the fuck they think. They always have to adjust that in their brain. And so they always, whoever they think about attacking their family or say something to me and I'll show them. And they can only ever envision what they can bite off and chew. But the reality is when it comes to violence, it's like a motherfucker holding you down and force feeding food down your fucking throat. You know what I mean? Like you don't have a fucking choice in the matter. You know what I mean? And it's like they can't put themselves in a situation where they're so completely outgunned and out fucking manned. Right? So that's my kind of first one legally. Not all villains are created equal. You got to adjust this legally. The second one is practical. And what I would say with the practical part of it is, again, are we thinking Johnny Lawrence, Karate Kid shit, or are we thinking Mike Myers, Freddy Krueger shit? What most men miss is that the seconds before the go signal, right, which would be the pin index, the seconds before the go signal are far less intense than the fractions of seconds and the subsequent seconds after the go signal. And so what I mean by that is that they tend to see it all the same. Right? Like they think, before it happens, someone's in your face, pa 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 pa. Fuck you. And if this guy starts swinging, pa-bam, pa-bam, if they get hit, they're just like, fuck you, fight on, like a hockey fight. Like, boom, guy takes you into the boards hard, you turn around. You chirp him, he chirps you, fuck you, you want to go? And all of a sudden, there's this mutual dropping of the gloves, there's the mutual clinch up, and then all of a sudden, there's all the fucking, the punching and the fight and all that type of stuff. Sorry, I just had this important message come to me here real quick as I'm sitting here, but that's okay. We're all good. I can handle this after the podcast. Sorry about that. So it's like this hockey fight, or sometimes a guy takes you into the boards hard, and then, one guy initiates, fuck you, his gloves already dropped, the other guy still got his gloves on, and, whatever, chirp, 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 chirp. Guy throws the first one or two punches, then buddy drops his glove and now fucking accelerates and ends up knocking that guy down. It's like the moments or the seconds before the fight, then there's the go signal, and then there's the fight. They see this as all equal. But the danger in this, and this almost ties back into my men picture somebody that they can fucking throw hands with. They picture someone that, again, they take a bite, but they can chew that bite. When the reality in violence is that the seconds before shit goes physical, before that go signal, as intense and terrifying as they can be in a life and death moment, they are like calm water compared to what happens after the go signal. The second violent predatory killers, the second they cross what we call the point of no return and this shit goes physical, the fucking intensity in those fractions and subsequent seconds that follow are off the fucking charts, because you got a Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger in the bloodlust of the kill. Like, these guys have no psychic fucking hindrance to stabbing and shooting and maiming. And I mean, I want to give you an example of this. One of our clients who's recently become a pilot, and he's doing medevac stuff up north, whatever. But one of the traumas he responded to, did this what people are doing, was a group of young men, 15, 17, 18, those late teens, kidnapping a 15-year-old girl, I believe it, assaulting her, violently assaulting her for hours, cutting off her fingers, and then making her ingest her fingers under the threat of death. Most people, if they heard this, go, bullshit. Because they just go, what type of fucking animals could do this? Yeah. Freddy Krueger's, Jason Voorhees, Mike Myers, fucking murderers. Sick, twisted, psychopathic fucking people. And yet they think, well, that didn't happen in Canada. Yes, it did. Like, no. Yeah, yes. And that is just like, there is so many, and if you want to start talking and researching criminality, you know, that's not the sickest thing you're going to find out there. And so I'm trying to make a fucking point. Johnny Lawrence of Karate Kid, the Cobra Kai, never did no shit like that. That's a different fucking villain altogether, my friends. And that should change your fucking standard for what you're training for. If you submit to that type of evil, you are at the mercy of those sociopathic motherfuckers who have no fucking empathy. Who do shit like this because it's a weekend and they're bored. It's a different fucking world. And so again, you don't throttle up to that shit. That is the standard, that is the foundation for where your training needs to be, and anything else can be throttled down. When you train for that and you are strategically, tactically, physically, psychologically prepared for that type of evil, asocial, where you do not have fucking choice. You cannot remove the escalator deterrent. They don't fucking ask. When you are prepared for that, when Cobra Kai comes to your high school, you know what I mean? You can throttle down and handle that. Most times it's easy to walk away from that shit because you're like, oh man, you have no idea what world I'm existed in. You're not evil. You're just a misguided, egotistical kid. Like, I'm just, it's your world. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut. I'm just going to leave. You know what I mean? It's nothing to walk away from those guys. But for far too many men, they can't walk away from the Johnny Lawrences because they've never really suffered. They've never really experienced threat. Even in psychologically, they can't go there. They can't imagine somebody scarier than them, stronger than them, tougher than them, willing to hurt their family. They can't imagine that evil. Their brain won't go there. And so, guess what? That's like an illiterate librarian. Those men are not protectors. They're useless as protectors. Still good members of society, most of them I would assume, but they're not protectors, right? And that becomes the hardest part of becoming a protector. You first have to imagine the evil you're going to face, and you have to accept it as a reality and see it for exactly what it is. And then, and only then, can you begin the process.
Yeah, I mean, circling back to your point about the comments on, if you bang up the bad guy, you're going to go to jail. It's you that gets convicted. And it's like, look at the facts you just shared. Do you know what I mean? Like that is disgusting. It makes me sick to my stomach to have to hear that happened to somebody. And it's like, you get that picture in your head and be like, you push back against that. You can't say that, like, oh, you're going to go to jail. Not against that kind of violence. No. Not a chance.
No.
But again, it's like you said, it's their inability to picture that type of violence because they're looking at the Johnny Lawrence when they make those comments. It has to be. Because I think even if those people actually watch this, which they won't, but if they did, I don't think they could listen to those facts about what happened here and dismiss that with the same type of comments. It's impossible.
Yeah. And they again, just understanding imminent grievous bodily harm or death. I mean, when that is present and you have no choice, you are devoid of choice. I mean, that is what self-defense is. And you have the legal ability and the moral righteousness, in my mind, to defend yourself up to and including lethal force. Now, again, the second the threat is no longer there, the second that imminent grievous bodily harm or death threat is no longer there, whether that's a fraction of a second into this altercation or 5 seconds in it or 5 minutes into it, when that threat is no longer a threat, then it stops. And you disengage and you remove yourself because the threat's no longer there, so all of a sudden you now have choice. That's the line between punishing and defending.
You said the same 3 words, I don't know how many times tonight, but devoid of choice. I think, we say it so much so often, we hear it so much so often, I think for people, they can accidentally or inadvertently kind of not dismiss it, but just kind of like look right past it or not even really hear you say it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like devoid of choice. Like it's gone. There is no choice.
Yeah.
So that's a completely different situation when it comes to self-defense. Like again, we're not talking about ego and getting pissed off and all this shit and emotions running out of control and forebrain rationalizations. Like, no, you're devoid of choice. There is no choice.
Yeah.
That alone is like such a game changer. But if you don't know that, and then you can't recognize that in these moments, like again, it's going to be much harder for you to defend what you did and to justify even to yourself morally what you did. And that's a whole other side of the podcast.
Well, yeah. And like, again, like, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've trained hundreds, if not close to, or if not into the thousands of men over these 30 years. And I'll tell you what, the vast majority of men that come in, they're good men. They understand. They have a concept of the evil that's in the world. That's why they come. If you don't have a concept of again, they're not, the men that come to me aren't worried about the Johnny Lawrences, right? They're not thinking they're going to face down Cobra Kai. They're worried about the killers, the murderers, the Michael Myers, the Jason Voorhees, those types of, hardcore criminals, gang, all that type of stuff. But I'll tell you what, in the course of training, many times the what if questions come up. Well, what if this happened? And what if that happened? And what if this happened? And I'll tell you something, 98% of all what if questions that come up are all antisocial aggression based. Well, what if this guy is, he's a threat to me, but then, I hit this guy with a flashbang and then he's kind of like, he's kind of hurt and this and that. And it's like, oh, so what's the greater context here, though? Because that sounds like a Johnny Lawrence. It sounds like, the way you're describing, and then the more you get the details come out, the more you're like, oh, you're talking antisocial aggression. Well, remember the first thing is, why didn't you just do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you remove the escalator deterrent? I can see several opportunities where you could have removed the escalator, deterred this situation. So why did you take this to a tactical end? And even if you did, then okay, so you're talking about throttling back to a level 6, 5, 6, whatever it is, do this, do that, and then it's like, oh, okay. But it's like, the interesting thing is here, I always then go, well, why don't we talk about this scenario? What happens when this happens and that happens and this happens? And you just see their face like, oh, fuck. It's like, I've seen guys turn white. And it's like, isn't that interesting how the scenario that I'm now putting forward to you is asocial violence, meaning you're devoid of choice, where you all of a sudden, you literally hear just thinking of it turn white because you're like, oh, fuck. What you just experienced was lack of choice. Like 3-4 guys grabbing you, pinning you fucking down, holding your mouth open and shoving food down your throat. And you feel that sensation where you're starting to fucking choke and you can't breathe and you're going into full fucking panic mode and you got, 600 pounds of dude fucking holding you down. You realize in that moment that you are completely at their fucking mercy. That is a terrifying fucking feeling that should make any man turn white. And yet there's lots of men that hear that go, yeah, I would have already fucking knocked them the fuck out, man. You should see me when I go beast mode. I could bench press 500 pounds. And it's like, holy Christ. Like, it's so hard for people, especially men, to get past the fucking ego. They just can't see themselves as vulnerable. They see that only as a weakness because we've been conditioned to see it as a weakness. But it's not a weakness because when you recognize vulnerabilities, you shore up the vulnerabilities, which is the strength. I mean, imagine a military operation where you check your perimeter and you see 7 different vulnerable points where you'd be easily susceptible to counterattacks or to attacks, and you decide not to shore them up because that'd be a sign of weakness. Well, I'm not going to fucking fortify that because I don't need to fortify that. I mean, look at me. I mean, have you looked at me lately? Fuck, maybe you haven't seen me shoot my gun. I got a gun, dude. Like, you haven't seen me do these things. Like, I'm a fucking killer. And it's like, okay, well, then don't. Well, why is it so different in personal protection? Why is that so different in the civilian world? But it is. But it's like everything we do in training is, again, we're training Jason Voorhees. I fully submit right now. I know hundreds, if not thousands of people that could, are way tougher than I am, way faster than I am, way stronger than I am, way more athletic than I am. And unfortunately, I know a lot of these dudes out there, and I know people that are being released in communities, they have far more body counts, and I'm not talking about the people they slept with. I'm talking about the people they fucking murdered. That should be terrifying to you, that you might face a criminal that's taken 7, 8 lives. I haven't had to take a life yet. I've used all my skill sets. I've used my tools to defend myself. I haven't had to take a life, thank God. I hope I never have to take a life. But you know what I'm training for is the motherfuckers that have, and they don't give 2 fucks. There's guys out there that have murdered and raped children. I shared the story. These motherfuckers raped, sodomized brutally for hours. As a matter of fact, I think it was over the course of 2-3 days, and then cut her fucking fingers off a 15-year-old girl and forced her to eat them for their entertainment. Otherwise, they're gonna fucking murder her. If you don't like step in the ring with that motherfucker, that's scarier than stepping in the ring with Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, you're gonna get punched and you're gonna break a lot of bones. You're gonna get knocked out, and the doctors will be there and they'll get you to the hospital, and it could kill you, but probably wouldn't. But whatever. But I'd rather that than fucking. I mean, again, that's fucking Johnny Lawrence shit. So, not all villains are created equal. So who the fuck are you preparing to face? And again, just, to me, just talking about the subject, fucking fire me. I want to go outside and train right now. And that's after a day of fucking training already. Because it just reminds me, it's like, yeah, man, this shit ain't fair. Like, what you're going against is fucking pure evil. And I want to be prepared. I can't sleep at night if I don't prepare. And when I prepare, I live a life peacefully. I don't walk around. I'm not paranoid. I'm not panicked. I get motivated, right? I got an email just today. Another man, 61 years old, lost his son. Fucking stabbed in the fucking neck. Another guy posted on my comment, was stabbed 9 fucking times. Seen his guts hanging out of his fucking stomach. You know what I mean? And that motherfucker, the guy that did it, and the guy gets off. I mean, this is not Cobra Kai bullshit. And if you're insulated from this to where you're just like, oh, the people that I'm worried about getting in a fight. Like I'm worried about some, what if I take my lady out one night, we go dance and salsa dance, and some fucking Latin lovers get in my face, you know what I mean? And this guy starts making a move on my girl. Fuck, man. I gotta be ready to take him outside. I'm crane kick that bitch. Like, and if he gets banged up, here's the sad part, boy, here's sad news. I get charged with that. It's like, holy fuck. You should be at a martial arts studio. That's exactly where you should be. You should be doing martial arts somewhere, 100%. Because your standard is very fucking different than what I'm preparing for. Right? And it's almost comical, but it would be if it wasn't so true. That's just the fucking scariest part of this. So anyways, the practical part of it, and again, why I think men get into this is it's ego, it's pride. Again, it comes back to, I don't like picturing something that I can't handle. And if that's truly, if you get to that spot, you have to take action. Otherwise, you won't. How do you sleep at night? Well, I couldn't sleep at night, but there's people, just denial. Rationalize, justify, minimize, make excuses, or just flat out refuse to accept the reality of situations. That's just fucking denial. And that's a coping mechanism. Just remember, denial is a coping mechanism because it protects you from unwanted information. Which is why a lot of people that maybe started listening to this podcast have already shut it off, right? Well, not really. The people that, this podcast goes too deep in the weeds. The people that listen to this like the weeds, you know what I mean? They're our kind of people. Other people, they don't even tune in. So anyways, let's make the last point here because we're already getting close to the hour here, which is fine. But so my last thing is this: not all villains are equal. There was the legal part of it, right? There's the practical part of it we covered, and now I want to talk about the psychological part of it. And we've kind of already hit on a lot of this, but I want to make this point slightly different. I think a lot of people project, and this is human nature. We're social creatures. Humans are the most social creatures on the fucking planet, so we crave connection with other humans, even though our whole world is set up to separate us, right? We don't live in communal houses typically. We live in, we each need our own big houses, space, all the shit. But we're social creatures. We want to connect. So we tend to project, our likeness onto other people. And then that becomes our people, right? We share values and, commonalities and things. Even sometimes when we disagree with people, but it's within what you said, Dustin, the social contract and the projecting of our values. But here's the thing. Interpersonal human aggression is a very polite way to talk about these killers, these murderers, these sociopaths, right? But to be debased and dehumanized are two words that Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman first, introduced me to in his work on killing and subsequent work on combat and warrior mindset. And as a mentor, it's such a clinical way to describe interpersonal human aggression, to be debased and be dehumanized by another member of your own species. Remember, combat and this type of interpersonal human aggression destroys 98% of all people that are exposed to it, psychologically or physically or both, right? Meaning that it leads to suicide, all these different things. But my experience, what I had when I, was the victim of that attempted murder, was when he said to be debased and dehumanized, that literally was what I felt. It's like, and this is not a stretch at all, but Nazis and Hitler and his whole entire movement is literally what they did. There's, what allows human beings to kill is emotional, psychological distancing, physical, social, moral, or cultural distancing. Those are 4 mechanisms. And the Nazis did this very, very well, meaning, why do you think they treated a class of people like cattle? They moved them like cattle, they fed them like cattle, they hosed them down like cattle, they slaughtered them like cattle. Because they literally got the German soldier to see them as less than, not human. That's, culturally they were different, socially different, and then physically they gave them tools to be able to conduct mass murders. And it's like, to be debased and dehumanized is to have that denied. So if we just go back to the one story shared, but how do you brutally, over days, torture a 15-year-old girl? Is this girl a threat to you? Was she like, what risk did she pose? Nothing. So what had to be happening in those individuals to so mercilessly, for such an extended period of time, and in such a grotesque manner? I mean, let's call it what it is. That's a fucking atrocity. To do that to a human being, a child, and then cut her fucking fingers off and feed them to her under the threat of death is an atrocity. That is what I'm talking about when you find these individuals, these Mike Myers and Jason Voorhees and Freddy Kruegers, these fucking absolute fucking monsters of the world. When they debase and dehumanize you, they do not see you. You're like a fucking ant. They're like, they got a magnifying glass and they're just fucking frying you on the sidewalk because it's fucking entertaining. Like, there's Johnny Knoxville's or Johnny Lawrence's Johnny Knoxville. There's Johnny Lawrence's of the world. I got to meet Johnny Knoxville one time, but anyways, there's the Johnny Lawrence's of the world. The Cobra Kai bad guys. And I'm not saying they're not bad guys, and I'm not saying that we don't have to be able to protect ourselves from these guys. But remember, remove the escalator, deter is often the choice in those situations. And yes, you may have to physically defend yourself, and you can throttle back, and you can do all those things 100%. But to be debased and dehumanized is a completely different level. And so psychologically, imagine what happens if you are not prepared for what we are talking about. When those types of individuals enter your atmosphere and you have your family with you and that fucking energy is around you and your face turns fucking white because you are devoid of choice. There is no, maybe this will happen, will this happen, won't this happen, maybe I can talk them out of it now. When you get hit with that fucking energy to when someone is looking at you like you are fucking worthless, and there is no moral code, there is no moral compass. Too many men project. They think that there's some redeeming quality, there's something similar in us. We're humans. There has to be something similar. You have to share. There's got to be a line you won't cross. Well, there fucking isn't. It's fucking pure fucking evil. That's where this shit starts. That's the villain you got. That's the fucking standard. I'll just say it again. You do not rise to your expectation. You fall to your level of training. And what that means isn't your skill set. It's talking about what's the fucking standard. What is the context which determined the content for all of your training? So the context that we start from is what happens when you find pure fucking evil. Matter of fact, let me rephrase that. What happens when pure fucking evil finds you or your loved ones or some innocent person? I'm going to use this again and then you can jump in, Dustin, but I go back 2 summers ago where that mother and daughter, mother picks up her 2 young children from school at 5 p.m. and the fucking repeat violent offender having a schizophrenic fucking psychotic fucking break walks by the butcher knife and starts stabbing her to death. Put yourself in that parking lot. Take a fucking time machine back and watch that, feel that. And now you'll understand debased and dehumanized. You know, and again, most people would look and say, "Oh, if I was there, I'd fuck that guy up." Most people, automatic in their brains, they make him a Johnny Lawrence. They make him somebody that would have been easy to just grab a hold of that guy by the shoulder and throw him on the fucking ground, or grab him and just start fucking pummeling this guy. Listen, I know a little bit about that guy, but what if that guy's not that guy? What if it's the Freddy Krueger or the Jason Voorhees or the Mike Myers? What if he's the fucking psychotic bath salt out of, people? Do you understand how, I can hear my mic cracking a bit, right? Understand what it's like when a human being has a psychotic snap, how strong they are? It is anything but fucking easy. Maybe Dustin, fill in a couple words. I'm just going to reset my mic real quick here.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's easy for a lot of people to think like, get involved in situations like that. I keep myself, I mind my own business, I go to work, you know what I mean? I just do all my normal routines and I don't interact with those types of people. And it's like, but I think what people fail to realize is that it's not always about choosing to interact or being around these types of people. Like that woman who picked her kids up from school. She was just picking her kids up from school too. She was minding her own business. She was just going about her own routines. She's not hanging out in crappy neighborhoods and associating with drug dealers and ex-convicts or like whatever. Like, it's just, as much as you can say like, "Oh, I don't need to worry about that." Yeah, you do, because you might be in that school parking lot. You might be at that mall when one of these, pieces of shit decides to inflict their will on some unsuspecting person who you may or may not know, but who cares? Because we need more people who are willing to rise up and stand up for themselves and for other people. And I think it's not necessarily something we get to choose. So I think it is everyone's responsibility to get trained and just to be ready for, should that dark moment ever show its face. Hopefully never, but it happens.
Yeah, I want to do a podcast on this down the road, but I'm going to there's Jeff Cooper, Colonel Jeff Cooper, just a famous firearms instructor, founder of Gunsight. But he had a saying, and just a couple little brief things, but it's really applicable right here, that there's something more valuable than even your own life. And as men that believe in our right to life and the freedom to defend that life, I always actually was like, well, if you don't have your life, what other right trumps your life? And it's the greatest right, the right to life. Because without life, no other right matters. But he always talked about the thing that's more valuable than even your own life is your dignity. And I cannot imagine being a man witnessing that type of attack and not having the skills, the knowledge, the willingness, the courage, whatever, to do something like, how do you sleep at night? Because you've lost your dignity. You're living with regret, and we've seen the effects of this, which often lead to deterioration of marriage, breakdown of family connection, drugs, alcoholism, and often suicide. And regret, or when a man loses his dignity or self-respect, those are catastrophic to men. And listen, we don't have this hero complex, and I'll say this all the time. There's lots of men that believe, and maybe they do, have the willingness and the courage to do something despite their fear. But if that is true, then you have a bigger responsibility, because you're one of the rarest resources we have on this fucking planet. Because the men that have it within them to be protectors are 1%. Right? And if you go into that, and even if you end up saving lives, but it comes at the cost of your own life, when it was preventable. These people, these violent, these evil guys, these, Jason, Freddy Krueger type motherfuckers, they do enough damage. They destroy enough lives. The last thing we need is courageous, willing men dying at the hands of these motherfuckers. And I hope people understand the same, because a lot of men I meet are like, I'm willing to die for my family. And my saying to them always, I want you to change that right fucking now. Be willing to kill for your family. There's a difference in killing and murdering. When legally and morally justified, can you kill? And when you come across these Jason Voorhees type motherfuckers where you are devoid of choice, imminent grievous bodily harm or death, there is no fucking choice, then it's them. You know what I mean? fuck you, doom on you. Like, I have that right to protect myself, and not just my life, but my fucking dignity. It's just that simple to me. But the context of personal protection and self-defense has to be studied, because I do believe that yes, there's legal obligations, legal requirements that have to be met, and I actually think that's a good fucking thing, because there should be a difference between legitimately defending and protecting and punishing. But the other side of that is I believe that there's a moral accountability in this as well. And I'm not saying that I'm the most moral person in the world and this and that, but there is a moral accountability in the sense that, again, I have the right to life and the right to protect that life. And I want to know what that means and what constitutes that. And I want to know the difference between, the Johnny fucking Lawrence's crowd, like getting sucked into antisocial aggression bullshit, and actually when I'm me or some other innocent person or someone I love is facing the asocial violence. So there's just like anything, there's a responsibility that comes with this. And that is why we do this podcast. This podcast doesn't monetize for me. I don't make money doing this. You know what I mean? You don't make money doing this. None of us are making money off it. We're not profiting off this. Yet every week we spend our time, you know what I mean? This is after days of training and, long days and time away from family. Why? Because this is a mission, and it is to educate more men. And it's like, it's fucking wake up time. I don't know. It is just so critical. I believe that there's a lot of things that need to happen, but I believe when you have men, when you help make men more sovereign, which means fundamentally a sovereign man can protect himself, his family, and loved ones. That is fundamentally what a sovereign man is. He has the ability, the skill sets, the mindset, and the knowledge to protect. When men have the confidence and certainty that comes from being able to protect, even if they never have to use those skill sets, they will then make changes in other areas. And that becomes a ripple effect. You will have a completely different society when you have more protectors in that society. And protect R, capital R at the end of it, not protect OR, protect R. Ready, real, resilient, relentless, and ruthless men who are willing to answer the call. Like, this is it. And I always define ruthless. Ruthless is men that value more. We just have to start valuing more, value our community more, value our fucking lives more, value our freedoms more. We just have to, that's a ruthless individual who values things. They take action. Right? And, our last week's podcast was on the criminals, the violent criminals have to fear their victims. Something's got to get these guys to become even more selective past the three predator optics that they go by. They got to just start in the back of their head going, shit, wonder if this is going to be one of those motherfuckers. One of those, protectors, one of those coined up motherfuckers that is, ready for this shit. Or you got to start thinking, Jesus, what if one of those guys is around? Because that's what it is. We have always been our own first responders. This will be my last point. We can do a whole podcast on this too, but police have an obligation to protect society as a whole, not the individual in society. That's been challenged in court many, 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 many times. They have no legal obligation to protect the individual. Their only legal obligation is to protect society as a whole, which is why when someone is known to police to be targeted and stalking and threatened and everything else, they have no legal obligation to protect that individual. Just society. And so we have always been the protectors of the individual. Every single person has the legal authority to protect their life, their freedom, right? That is life, liberty, freedom, and security. That has always been with us. And yes, things get convoluted in the courts, and yes, you can at times, it's always a struggle going on. But that has never disappeared. But people just don't understand fundamentally what that really means. They don't study, quote unquote, self-defense. They study fighting arts. And fighting arts are all predicated and geared towards antisocial aggression. And it's the Johnny Lawrence bullshit. That's what's fundamentally different with our program. People come into our program and they're fucking like, what the fuck is this shit? So, but you knew you were coming to study violence. Violence is very fucking different than fighting. These are two separate fucking worlds, my friend. Do you know what I mean? But that's what this is. So, anyways, I don't know. So, not all villains are created equal. Be careful as to what villain you have running in your head. Okay, if you're joining us late and you didn't hear this from the beginning, I highly recommend this is one of the episodes you go back and re-listen to, because this is starting to rewire the blueprint, and you got to answer the question. You got to create a different avatar, for the type of evil that you're facing. That's the foundation you're going to build your house on, and everyone knows what happens when you build it on a soft foundation. So, I don't know. Any final thoughts, Dustin?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think kind of hit them all.
Okay, yep. All right, that's it, everybody. Hey, listen, I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank you more importantly than listening. I want to thank you for sharing. I want to thank you for commenting, you passing the word that this is how this podcast is growing. We are not, this podcast by nature is designed to weed people out. It is not designed for everybody. For those that listen, that follow, that think like we think, this is what's going to make the change, is people and men like you. So again, it's our deepest thanks and appreciation, and for helping spread our message to other men who think like we think and think like you think. So at the end of the day, I always leave it with this. If there's anything that we can ever do to be a part of your journey to help weaponize other good men, to join our mission, to have, again, my goal this year in the next 12 months is to add 200 new men. In the last year alone, I've weaponized and trained up 100 men. And that's 7 days a week we're doing it. And it's a lot, but I want to double that in the next 12 months, because I believe it is absolutely fucking pivotal. It is mandatory for us to get more men that have the skill sets, the knowledge, the understanding to be life-saving forces in dark, critical moments. So if this shit resonates with you, then I invite you to join the mission, and to join our group of men that are weaponizing and becoming that life-saving force. If you're interested, you can check out weaponized16.ca, weaponized16.ca, and I can send you out I create a 30-minute video for each person that requests information, and that just breaks down how I do this. All our training is done privately, but that has all the details. So other than that, everybody, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dustin, for your time, your energy, your experience. We appreciate it. And we'll be back next week, everybody. So until next time, stay safe, stay weaponized. Chat again soon, everybody.